Speaksies.
Hello and welcome to Origin of Species, Season 5, Episode 120. My name is Scott, and as always, I'm here with my good friend Steve. In today's episode, Steve's going to tell us about some new slang.
Oh, yeah.
Snatched, which I'm intrigued by. I didn't cheat and look.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do. But we're also going to talk about some, I think, topical terms. So cabin fever is the first one I'm going to do. We're going to talk about basket case, and then a little bonus one as well, stir crazy. So I had thought about doing cabin fever back last year when we were right in the heart of the lockdown, but weirdly it felt too on the nose. It was like, do I really want to be talking about this? But now that we're back, we're out and about, kind of, which
a little bit.
It's a little confusing, which is going to be a theme here of this this episode,
or the rest of 2021. I think it's just a confusing year.
It's very confusing. So Steve, you and I had a chance to go out and see a comedy show recently, and I think we both mentioned, like, it just felt weird. It was fun. We had a blast, but
yeah,
the vibe being around people, I think, having been quarantined for so long and sort of the confusion that's going on, there was definitely a different vibe, and it kind of played out that night as well.
It did. The performer, who will remain nameless for now, described it as there was a weird energy in the room, and I don't think anyone there disagreed with him, and especially the people who broke out into a fist fight during the middle of the show.
Yeah, and it wasn't like I expected a fight, but I don't know about you. When everything went down, I definitely did I was kind of like, yeah, this feels right. Like,
yeah.
Before we went in, we were like, does it seem weird? We're in a strip mall with a bunch of people that are relatively dressed up, like no sweatpants.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll save the rest of that for another time.
Yeah.
But it does feel confusing out there. I was thinking about now going to stores, the evolution of, okay, when quarantine first happened, all the signs that were like, must wear mask, period. It's the law.
Mm-hmm.
Then it got to a place where it was like, if you're fully vaccinated, fully, no mask is required, which always was kind of funny, because it's like, if you're not getting a vaccine, you're probably not somebody that's going to wear a mask anyway. So, but we're on the honor system. Yeah. Now I'm seeing signs that are just wear a mask regardless. It's strongly encouraged. People don't know whether they get the vaccine or not. People don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think mentally we're all in a weird place. And when I say we, I mean me, for sure. So, cabin fever being the first one that we're going to talk about has an interesting history on how the term has changed. First, I'll tell you a little bit about what I found when I did my research just on what it actually means. So, according to Merriam-Webster, cabin fever is an extreme irritability and restlessness from living in isolation or a confined indoor area for a prolonged time, which I thought was interesting. That irritability came up a lot, and I started thinking, well, maybe that's it, because I feel like I've been very irritable over the last year and a half, which you could probably vouch for, and maybe it's cabin fever. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I like that it gives a reason to potentially be irritable, because I was thinking about that myself, that I'm sure my wife and daughter would agree that I've been irritable. But is that any different than how I am in other years? That would be up for discussion.
That's my thinking too, is I've just been thinking, as we go on and see the other effects of cabin fever, I'm like, this kind of describes me. Can I pin this on the cabin fever? So one thing that came up too, as I looked into cabin fever, this should probably go without saying, but there's an article on a website called medicalnewstoday.com,
mm-hmm.
which said, look, cabin fever is not an actual diagnosis, right? Like, you're not going to go to the doctor and he's going to say you got cabin fever, which got me thinking too about the history of medical practices, right? And it's one thing when you break your leg and you can say, this guy's got a fractured tibia, versus Wait, is that leg? Tibia? I think so.
I think
Anyway,
so.
fibula, tibia.
Why not?
Um, but when it comes to mental things, like you did an episode on hysteria a while
Mhm.
back. We've done other ones. There are a bunch of like terms that we won't get into today, but like shell shocked. There are
Right.
these terms that, wandering womb came from yours, that you're trying to describe what's going on, but you don't really have the vernacular yet. So cabin fever is one of those, but it started
Mhm.
in a really interesting place. So we'll get there. But medical news today said it's a cabin fever is psychological symptoms that a person may experience when they are confined to their home for extended periods. Such symptoms may include feelings of restlessness, irritability, and loneliness.
Hmm.
Again, a couple things I found interesting there. So, like I mentioned before, it's not an actual illness.
Right.
They also said that cabin fever is usually associated with the winter months, but with the COVID lockdowns, it's more prevalent than ever, which
Mhm.
got me thinking about, and this isn't going to be a medical podcast. There's only so far I can go with this, but got me thinking about seasonal affective disorder, which is
Mm.
something that you and I've talked about before.
Right.
There's something that happens when the sun goes down earlier,
Definitely.
um, and that's a real thing. I mean, that's something that is is hormonal. It has to do with not seeing the sun as much. And during the lockdown, there was certainly a lot of talk about the importance of vitamin D and getting out in the sun.
Mhm.
So I think when it comes down to like a medical um, diagnosis, seasonal affective disorder is probably the closest thing I would say to cabin fever.
Yeah.
That's as my official. Um, you know what? We're gonna get like banned or deplatformed because I'm giving some weird medical advice right now. But I'm not. This is not
No.
medical advice. I promise.
I don't even think people pay attention to that. I don't think I can look at anything on Instagram without it being like covered in
Right.
COVID-19 instructions. So, I mean, I think people just look past that anyway. And if we get in trouble, we'll call our friend Dr. Jenny McCarthy and she'll bail us out.
It's funny you say that. I was just listening to the on a podcast about the
Mhm.
origins of like the anti-vax movement, and that's a
Yeah.
whole nother discussion. So so in that same article, they said that the signs of cabin fever. So if you
All
think
right.
you might be suffering from cabin fever, boredom,
Okay.
good old irritability,
Mhm.
impatience,
Always.
restlessness,
Most of the time.
lack of motivation,
Mm.
loneliness, hopelessness. They get darker as you go down.
Right.
Depression and
Right.
anxiety. Um, so I mean, I'm not trying to diagnose you right here, but
Please.
those are some things that you can get. The effects of cabin fever. So if you go down that list and you're like,
Mhm.
those sound familiar,
Yeah.
you may be suffering from the informal diagnosis of cabin fever.
Hmm.
Um, and then effects of cabin fever include feeling unable to keep up with a daily or weekly routine, difficulty sleeping, sleeping too much. So
Mhm.
basically, an unhealthy
Right.
relationship with your sleeping, changes in grooming, eating habits, or alcohol.
Hmm.
Um, again, as I was reading this, I was like, I have cabin fever.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking, I don't know, a lot of these maybe were in effect prior to the lockdown. I don't know. Um, so listen, if this stuff rings true, guess what? You'll never believe what you should do if you think you have cabin fever. Exercise, eat better, get into a sleep routine. Basically, almost anything that you have, just do
Right.
those things, and you're probably gonna be okay.
Give yourself minimal maintenance and the only amount of effort to keep yourself alive should basically
Right.
cure these things. Exercise, get out in the sun,
Yep.
put yourself in some sort of order. And I say like it's real easy considering it'll be interesting if we revisit this back in when January returns to see how I'm doing because I definitely feel like I get this more seasonally than during the summer.
For sure. Yeah, we've talked about it for years. It's something that happens. I do think though there is definitely going back to how we started the show.
Mhm.
I There are some effect, like all kidding aside, there are definitely effects that are coming out of this long period of time of being somewhat isolated. And it's weird seeing them play out, like just being out and about. There's, in my opinion, no matter kind of where I've gone, it's just weird vibes. It still doesn't feel normal yet.
It feels like people have gone feral to an extent. Like there's
Hmm.
just certain things, certain basic civil things to do to interact with other people that have been forgotten. Like people were very short tempered. It seems like with service staff, and like we were describing the time that we went out, um, which is just reinforced me why I never go out anywhere. There was just a weird energy. Like people just
Hmm.
were there was something pent up, but people didn't know what to do with it.
Well, yeah, and I went to a concert, this like big outdoor concert, and again, going back to the confusion, leading up to the concert, they were saying, "Okay, everybody's going to be in a bubble, like not an actual bubble, but like some sort of taped circle
Hmm.
around, like." Okay, because COVID's not going to jump from one bubble to the other. But if you're all mashed together at a concert as if you're protesting, then you'll be
Yeah.
fine. But uh,
And maybe
then you,
that's the key. Maybe what you need to do is just to spray
yeah,
paint things and shout profanities, and you'll be
yeah,
protected.
that's what I've been told reliably
Mhm.
by the media. But anyway, no, but what I've noticed is people are either feral, like you said. There's a weird like a fight might happen any minute energy. I think there's people wanting to overshare, which I do anyway all the time, but getting into long conversations and just go, because you haven't had anybody to talk to.
Right.
It's weird. I did want to read an excerpt from an article that I found, um, which was really interesting, and it was talking about the struggle people have with cabin fever specifically
Mhm.
now. Well, specifically at the time this article was written, it talks about the fact that people aren't traveling, they're staying at home, they're worried about bio attacks. It says one of the best things you can do is, it just says, relax, keep in touch with your friends even if by phone. This is something that people are really stressed about. Here's what's interesting: guess when this article was written?
Tell me.
February 11th, 2002.
Oh.
So just a few months after 9/11. And I was reading the article thinking it was talking about the pandemic, but it was
Mhm.
saying, it was talking about anthrax, and people didn't want to leave their house. People don't want to travel.
Yeah.
Um, and it's causing, and again, this is from 2002. He's saying this is causing a version of seasonal affective disorder because people aren't going outside. And this is 2002. It's just, we think everything is new kind of, and nothing
Right.
is really new. Like this is something that hits when we freak out and we can't leave our house. I thought that was kind of crazy. So let's get to the phrase, where did it come from? Since after all, that's what we're here for.
Mm.
Cabin fever was coined over 100 years ago in North America. Originally, the term cabin fever was associated with typhoid fever. So when I said this term has kind of evolved over the years, that's what I
Mhm.
meant. It was, and which is explains why the word fever is in cabin fever, because obviously you don't get a fever from having cabin fever. Um, According to Grammarist, cabin fever frankly, was used interchangeably with typhoid fever as far back as the 1800s. So that's where cabin fever started. The way we use it today came from a novel, a Western novel called Cabin Fever,
Mm.
about a man named Bud
Mm.
who was feeling trapped in his life as a husband and father. He left his wife and kids, set out to find his fortune with a prospector named Cash. It's subtle.
Yeah.
Um, so this book, the book Cabin Fever, was written by B.M. Bauer, which was the pen name of a woman named Bertha Muzzy Sinclair,
Hmm.
which I would like to say, bad move by B.M. Bauer. B.M. Bauer, first of all, BM,
Yeah.
it's not an improvement on Bertha Muzzy Sinclair. That, now, granted, it's probably because of the patriarchy, but I think she should have stuck
Right.
with that.
Yeah, she should have fought back against the patriarchy. She should have got on Twitter and just been herself.
Right. Bertha Muzzy Sinclair. So she wrote this book, and that sort of captured the idea of being isolated out, moving west. I think of, you know, uh, the movie Will There Be Blood, or There Will Be Blood, where these people are just, it's just an example of people that are just living with the same few people. They kind of go a little nutty.
Yeah.
Um, there was an article by Andrew Balansky on InCaseYou'reInterested.com that had some citations from around that time in newspapers. he noted the Cincinnati Enquirer defined cabin fever as, quote, that irritation and temper, that quarrel breeding state of mind that comes to those whose lives are too confined and monotonous without action of variety. And the New York Times noted it's the common disease of overwhelming domesticity.
Mm.
And the Virginia Times Dispatch pegged the condition to Western life, saying there's a certain malady of mind induced by too much monotony. Fashionable folk call it ennui, but Westerners call it cabin fever. So the term was equally applicable to the Eastern elite who, shell-shocked by World War I, ensconced themselves in log cabins in places like the Adirondacks and the Poconos. So the big thing here is it went from actually specifically meaning typhoid fever to meaning this thing that people were experiencing, the monotony of life, essentially.
Right.
Hey, this is great. You've got this cool log cabin and have clean water and a couple pigs, but you start losing your mind.
Yeah.
So let's see, just to wrap that one up, it's nowadays it's more so used, I would say, in a humorous way almost, or like if I say I'm getting cabin fever, it means
Right.
I just need to get out of the house. I don't really think of it as seriously as it was used back in the day. I would also like to say cabin fever, when I think about that, really probably one of the first things I think of is the movie, the
Right.
Eli Roth movie, which I thought was a pretty good movie if you like that kind of movie. It's fine if you like that kind of movie.
Right.
It was funny though, because I can't remember, I think it was WebMD. And so I can't remember exactly, don't quote me on it, but went through, it was like a medical journal or WebMD, but it actually did this breakdown of the movie Cabin Fever in a very technical way, saying like what they got, which is like spitting up blood and, it's a
Right.
horror movie, is based on an actual disease, but they went out of their way to say, but it's not actually cabin fever. So
Right.
it kind of made me laugh. And then what also made me laugh was there have been sequels to Cabin Fever. I don't know if you know this. They remade Cabin Fever.
I did know that.
And I had a laugh because there was a quote that said, quite possibly the most unnecessary horror remake in quite some time. And it has an impressive 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
So don't watch that, but
No.
the first one's not too bad. Before we get to the next segment, I did want to briefly touch on a related term, stir crazy.
Stir crazy.
So stir crazy is, let's go to the Jonathan Green's Dictionary of Slang, where he says it can also mean stir batty, stir happy, stir loony, or stir nutty, as long as you got the word stir in there.
Stir, okay.
And it was used by a prisoner who has succumbed to prison-induced insanity, psychosis induced by imprisonment. So while we haven't really been imprisoned, I think that would be taking it a little too far to say that we've been imprisoned, but some people might be going stir crazy. Why prison? Well, in 19th century London, the stir crazy, meaning going nuts while in prison, according to the Barnhart Dictionary of Etymology, says stir may have originated as a variation of start, a nickname criminals gave to Newgate, which is a notorious prison throughout London's history. So why was it called start? There are like 3 or 4 potential, somewhat boring explanations for that. But I did think it was interesting to call out stir crazy as being prison slang and something that some of us may be feeling right now.
And I think that's very interesting too, and a great lead up to a new segment that we're introducing this season, prison slang. Prison slang with Mindy the Dog.
Hey guy, my name is Mindy the Dog. I live in Richmond, Virginia with my best friend and her family. Here's some things to know about me. I am a beagle. I spent time at a dog rescue run at a prison. I ain't going back to prison. I look good. A few years ago, I was rescued by my best friend. We are best friends, and I get sad when she is not around. I live with her and the rest of her pack. My best friend is clearly the alpha of the pack. Like me, she looks good. I get lonely when she goes away. Unfortunately, when she leaves, I am left with her beta. My best friend calls him Steve. I call him the honking man. When he's not eating all my food, he likes to wear a bandana. Here's some pictures from when he put me in one. And he tried to give me a kiss. No way, guy. I know I look good, but get off me. I often wish he would go away so I could have my best friend all to myself. This makes me think of what would happen if he had to go to prison like me, especially he does not look as good as me. So here's some prison slang about being new in prison, courtesy of prison-diaries.com. Fish. In men's facilities, this is a term used for new prisoners. A fish is new to prison politics and the reality of how facilities run. I think this also refers to what happens to be a fish out of water, and for the honking man with his bandana and his tiny shorts to get hooked in the mouth. Pumpkins. New inmates. Also gang members who were initiated by being beaten in the head so badly their heads look like swell pumpkins. This one makes me think of the honker man because he has such a fat head. With his big old head, I don't know if anyone could tell the difference. Even though if you look at his head, it looks more like a fat pineapple than a fat pumpkin. Finally, gay for the state. Selective and temporary sexual orientation that causes both men and women to become involved with people of the same sex for the time they're incarcerated and nothing longer. This one really has nothing to do with being new in prison, but it definitely makes me think of the honker man. Hey guy, thank you for listening to Prison Slang. If you want to learn more about me and how good I look, you can find me at Instagram at The Real Mindy the Dog. You can listen to Origin of Species at your favorite podcast provider. If you like this segment and want to support Origin of Species, go to patreon.com/species. That's patreon.com/species. I'm Mindy the Dog and, hey fat guy, get away from my food, honky man.
It's very interesting to see your dog's thoughts put to visuals, especially with her thoughts about me. And
Yes.
you as a new dog owner, I've met Ziggy, your dog. I don't think your relationship is the same
No.
as the one that Minnie the dog and I have.
I would say that's accurate. By the way,
Yeah.
I was thinking before we started today,
Mhm.
we I don't know if this is I think of everything through the lens of should this be a podcast, which is probably not a good way to think about things, but
Right.
we need to have a segment just called like why do dogs do this? Because I take Ziggy, my dog, for a walk before we start recording, and it's raining a little bit, and I give him ample time standing outside on the deck to do that shake thing. Why
Right.
does he wait till we get inside and then just shakes it all off? I don't know. Why do dogs do things?
Yeah. Generally, it's food is the answer for
Yes.
about 99% of why dogs do things.
True.
But maybe they just can't wait to get inside. So
Yeah.
we're talking about cabin fever, being locked
Mhm.
inside.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I've gotten around that over the last however long the vid has lasted and will last afterwards, by basically walking out, being at home a lot, but kind of exploring my neighborhood and getting outside and trying to get that fresh air, trying to get out of my office and, get some sunshine, get some exposure. So you've known, especially as you've had to record me for years, that my seasonal allergies are pretty intense.
Yes.
Not debilitating, but enough that they're actually they're old recordings that you can tell. It sounds like someone has like stuffed concrete in my nose before we've gotten on
Right.
air. And we actually had that one set. You remember for Halloween a couple years ago, there was a
Mhm.
sound effect that accidentally occurred when I tried to make a ghost
Oh,
sound.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So I finally got my stuff together and went
Mhm.
to the allergist, which is an experience. Like sometimes you do stuff, and you're like, everyone should do that. I don't know if
Yeah.
everybody should do this.
Mm.
And if you've been before, there's the time where they basically poke your back with a bunch of things and then chart how your body reacts. So I
Ugh.
had a pretty interesting discussion with my allergist afterwards because I found out I'm allergic to everything.
Okay, so
And I'm not being facetious. There's a
oh,
list of trees. So every tree on the list, I'm
mhm,
allergic to those trees.
unbelievable. Were you shocked?
Little bit that I was allergic to everything. I mean, I've always kind of known that if I lived 100 years ago, I would be one of the children that you would see in someone's biography. John Smith had, or Joe Glisman had 10 kids, and Steve number 3 died early.
Yeah.
I would either get some disease, or as soon as I could walk, I would find my way to a well or a thresher. I mean, I have no doubt about that. So I'm allergic to every tree.
Well, real quick before you move
Please.
on, is this a deal where I haven't done this because I've heard somebody that said, yeah, I went to the allergist and they did like a million pricks on my back, and then I'm like, I'll just deal with whatever the allergy is. Um, did they did you have to wait? I don't know how it works. Did they like call you, or did the allergist like call in the other allergists and say, hey, get a load of this guy? He's coming up positive on every tree.
No, the only time other people come in to laugh at me is when I go to the dermatologist and I'm naked. There seems to be other people that come in and point and laugh. In this case, what they do is they poke your back, and then they say, sit here for 10 minutes and don't itch anything.
Mhm.
And it's very good that they say that, because you spend the next 10 minutes wanting to, find a piece of
Mm,
jagged wood to rub your back against.
right.
A benefit of this, I did learn that there is something called liquid Benadryl, which was sprayed on my back. And
Oh,
at that moment, like, you remember the story of, I think Esau sold his birthright for a
right.
bowl of soup.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm lucky. Don't really know what a birthright is, but I would probably give it up for liquid Benadryl. So afterwards, the hello brain, what is the thing? The allergist comes in and wants to go over all the things that I'm allergic to, which again is everything. So they have to kind of walk through this list.
Mhm.
So, going through all the trees, she basically says there should be some time in winter when you can go outside,
Oh my gosh.
which was nice for
What?
her to share. But then they go through other bugs or other things that maybe you wouldn't spend that much time with. For instance, cockroaches. And she's going through the checklist. She's like, do you spend much time with cockroaches? And I'm like, no. She goes, well, that's good, because you're allergic to them. And it made me realize that there's somebody that they've had
Yeah,
to talk to and go, you know what? I do live in an infestated cockroach environment.
right,
Is that bad? You know, because if
right.
I'm allergic, I probably shouldn't do that.
I
I
mean,
guess that's the thing.
that's a one of those, you're kind of missing you've got bigger problems. No, I mean, listen, I'm not sitting up in my ivory tower. It's not like I've never been around cockroaches, but
Right.
if your life consists of cockroaches, scrambling over your body, then I don't know that I'd even be at the allergist. I'd
Exactly.
be anywhere but there, and that'd probably take care
Right.
of that part, but they have to ask, huh?
I guess they have to ask with that. So in the end, I had the option to receive an extended series of doses that made me think if I had to have my kidneys tapped daily, that would probably be more
Good
pleasant
lord.
than having to go back for shots. And then they prescribed to me prescription medicine that I found out has an FDA black box warning of, I believe, increased anxiety and suicidal thoughts, which would be great to go with my cabin fever of having to stay inside. So for right now, I'm going with my over the counter medicine, going to stick with that.
Wow.
And everyone who listens to the show can kind of guess when we've recorded. Early spring, late fall are really good times when I'm extra allergic and full of additional liquids. But I'm allergic to everything, not surprised. But liquid Benadryl, if anyone ever gets a
Okay.
chance to get a hold of that, when they soaked my back with that, that was almost worth it, just to have that experience, to have the pain relief that comes from
That
liquid
is,
Benadryl.
and I'm not kidding, that is very good to know, because my issues with bug bites and things I'm
Mhm.
allergic to, which I I'm gonna try liquid Benadryl.
Have
All
you
right.
been spending time with bugs?
Um, we don't need to get into it,
Okay.
but it's not cockroaches.
Okay, good.
It's remember I didn't want to leave my house for like 6 weeks because of the bug bites on my legs.
Yeah.
pretty brutal.
And I
So
thought you were being a little bit of a stick in the mug about that until I saw your legs, and you made the right decision.
I told Steve, hey man, heads up. So I'm allergic to chiggers. I didn't want to make this about me. This is about your allergies that you're not
Yeah.
going to treat. But I am part of, I think he said, the doctor said like 30% of the population that is allergic to chiggers. So if I walk through tall grass and they've got, don't look this up because then you'll never want to be around me because it's really gross.
Yep.
But I told Steve, just heads up. And he's like, oh, whatever. And then he's like, hey, I'm really glad you warned me about that. That was startling.
Yeah,
So I
it was.
like,
It was shocking. So I'm sorry you had to go through that, and I'm glad you gave me, you know me well enough. It was very smart on your end to give me
yes,
a heads up.
I tried to do my best. All right, you ready to do a new slang?
Am I? I'm
Let's-
ready for new slang.
New slang when you notice the stripes.
So during our last season, Reader's Digest was my go-to for new slang. And when you think of edgy and new, I personally always think of Reader's Digest. That's the first thing that comes up.
Mhm.
But I wanted to push myself. It's a new season. We're doing new things. I have a dog who has access to prison slang and probably shanks and other weapons from prison. So I felt like I really needed to turn it up a notch. So I have a new resource I'm using, an article entitled New Teen Slang and Acronyms for 2021 from parentology.com.
Nice.
So the term that I'm exploring today is snatched.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. So to be clear, if you've listened to the show before, I'm not known for my ability to enunciate properly. So I want to be clear, the word I'm saying ends in ed, snatched.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a good one for you to say when you have one of your horrible head colds and nobody can understand you. So make sure.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So this is
Is-
definitely when you first told me what you were going to do, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're PG-13.
Mhm.
We push it sometimes, but
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't heard this one. Like I said before, we've been doing this podcast. This is what, year 3, and we're coming up on our 3-year anniversary. And I've become tremendously older every year. Like I don't feel like it's been every year I've gotten a year older. Like at first I knew some of these. I have no
Yeah.
idea what this means. So drop the. And I like too that you got to get it from Parent Magazine. Have we moved on from Urban Dictionary?
Parentology.com.
Oh, parentology.com.
Let's get that right.
Yes.
Well, Urban Dictionary will always come up, and we'll see them here in a moment. So
Okay.
for Parentology's debut, even though they gave me a good list of new slang, they get the first definition we're going to use is actually wrong. So let me go ahead and give that and correct them. So from parentology.com, snatched can be used as a way of pointing out when someone has been scathingly insulted, similar to burnt or roasted. However, the term snatched is also used to describe someone who is dressed to the nines in stylish clothing. So the first definition I gave there of pointing out that someone's been insulted, I haven't found anywhere else. So let's go ahead
That was
and
somebody
scratch
at, that was somebody at Parenting Magazine.
trying to get into parentology.com
Right.
and mess them
Oh,
up.
sorry, I messed it up again. Yeah,
It's okay.
Parentology.
And we're going to stick with the second definition. And I love also that as they're giving new slang, that I'll repeat it. The term is used to describe someone who is dressed to the nines in
Yeah.
stylish clothing.
Right.
Good job, Grandpa.
That's
So from Urban Dictionary, snatched, used to take the place of on fleek, perfect, on point, or fashionable. And as always, the Urban Dictionary gives us a great quote.
Oh yeah.
Girl, your outfit is snatched. Your makeup snatched, honey. They just hating because I'm always snatched. Thank you, Urban Dictionary.
Yeah.
So I like what they have here, but dictionary.com came through for us on this. They have a lot of detail. So really going to get into this, dig deep here for snatched. So from dictionary.com, what does snatched mean? Is your wig still on, queen? In drag slang, snatched is fierce or on point, i.e., excellent, especially when it comes to personal appearance. So, as you might guess from the first line that I read, is your wig still on, queen? This comes from drag. If you weren't sure about that,
Oh,
the next sentence I read said in drag slang. So I think we see where this comes from. To
okay.
continue to beat this to death, where does snatched come from? Again, dictionary.com. We can thank New York City drag culture in the 1990s for slang like hunty, slay, yes, and snatched. Snatched specifically comes from black drag culture, where performers wear artificial hair called weaves. If something is
Oh,
absolutely amazing, snatched, it might just snatch your weave off, a la knock someone's socks off.
so this was very satisfying because if you saw my face was just the whole time like, why do we need this term? I don't get it. But the snatching off of the weave thing,
Yeah.
it all comes together. It's very satisfying as to why this is a term. Very good.
Yeah. And I like to conclude with what dictionary.com tells us
Hmm.
that this was a word that picked up as other slang, like on fleek,
Yeah.
fell out of favor.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a cycle. I mean, there are other words. And again, having a 14-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter,
Mhm.
I'm hearing new words every day. And I'll say, what does that mean? And they'll just, it means good or cool. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
we just need a new word for the same thing because who says on fleek now?
Not me. I'd say slang like hunty, slay, yes, and now snatched. So, in case you can't tell, I give snatched a thumbs up. Scott, what about you?
I will also give it a thumbs up. A thumbs up. I was thumbs down the whole time
Hmm.
until you really brought it home with the origin of it. So it's a good solid origin. I give it a thumbs up.
All right. And that is our new slang.
All right, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? I'm one of those melodramatic fools, neurotic to the bone, no doubt about it. The term basket case was invented by Green Day in 1994. End of episode. Thank you for listening to Origin
Yeah.
of Species. Become a Species supporter by going to no. When I think about basket case, I think about Green Day. That was like
Hmm.
right in my wheelhouse of I
Yeah.
had the Dookie poster on my wall.
Hmm.
Um, I remember them performing this song on David Letterman. I don't think I had heard the term, or at least it was the thing that brought it to the forefront in my life.
Hmm.
When I say basket case, what do you think of? You were I wouldn't say you were like a big Green Day fan or anything, but
I wasn't, and as you know, in the 90s, I was one of those guys too that just didn't like, I was contrarian, even more than I am now. But I wasn't really into the pop punk stuff, so I didn't care for them. And I think you and my brother both liked them a lot, so that didn't help either.
yeah, you don't want the
Um,
younger brother have the
yeah,
same taste as the younger brother.
yeah. But when I think of basket case, I actually think of a horror movie from the late 70s
Mm,
called Basket Case, where I
mhm.
believe there's a brother who has a former Siamese twin brother that he carries around a basket, and the brother in the basket like eats a lot of people.
That sounds like an awesome premise,
It
actually, for a
is.
horror movie.
And it was based on a lost novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald that if he had
Hmm,
lived, that was going to be his next book.
wow.
Yeah.
People would be thinking about that instead of The Great Gatsby. That's
Oh,
pretty cool.
definitely. That would really
Um,
have surpassed it.
I saw that movie. I'm not surprised you've seen it. I haven't seen it. It came up in my research, and I didn't. I wondered if it was one to. Would you suggest that one if you're a horror fan or
I think more if you're a cheese fan, it's
okay?
probably, I don't think anyone's going to lose any sleep over that movie.
Yeah. Well, I do love cheese, so now I'm really wondering what to do. Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So, but basket case is a term that I think is relevant now because sort of like I was talking before about feeling stir crazy, feeling um, having cabin fever, shell shocked, whatever it is. A lot of people may be saying I'm like a basket case. And again, the way we use the term now, it's
Right.
not very serious. Like normally, if I'm using it, I'm describing somebody else. Like it kind of go like, man, that person's like a basket case.
Right.
I just mean they're like, they seem very overwhelmed and not able to really function very well. And I've certainly used it for myself. Let me read the definition from Oxford Languages. And what's interesting here is that there are two definitions, one of which I had no idea about. And I'd be curious if you knew this or not. So the first one is a person or thing regarded as useless or unable to cope. And an example they give is, quote, do that for a couple of days and you become a blithering basket case. The second one, though, is a country or organization that is in severe financial or economic difficulty, especially one that is unable to pay its debts. Quote, sudden meltdowns, such as the financial crisis, can turn flourishing countries into basket cases overnight. Had you heard that?
I actually had not heard either of those described that way.
Right. Okay. So then what? Yeah, exactly. So basket case to me just meant a super anxious kind of person. And this one specifically says useless, unable to cope.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the overwhelming thing. And then the thing about a organization in crisis, when I first saw this in my research, I was like, this is weird. This must be some other country. So I kept looking. It comes up everywhere.
Right.
And part of that is because it's used mostly in the UK. And it's used, there are tons of headlines where they'll talk about, you know, I don't really, I guess, name names on countries, but it'll be like, you know, Ireland's a basket case at this point, and you're like,
right,
Ireland's a basket case, but they use it in that way. There are political cartoons as well. So it is used quite frequently in that way. And in fact, well, actually, before I go there, how did you use it, or how did you think about it?
I've almost thought about it. I think in conjunction a lot with cabin fever, like someone who's has cabin fever would be a basket case. Someone who's just so anxious that they're just over anxious, and it just almost crazy. Like another way to say crazy, kind of an embellishment to say that.
Perhaps neurotic to the bone.
Maybe.
No doubt about it. So yeah, that I think that's how we sort of use it, the connotation we have now, but it's really not the definition. So in this one, spending a little more time again on the definition, because so I found an article in The Guardian called Basket Case, the case against.
Okay.
And it's actually basket case, and some people actually refer to it as I think of it as an offensive term. And I will get to why here. But in the Guardian article, it cites a number of times that the term basket case has been used, as I mentioned, in headlines to describe countries with failing economies. But the reason that it's offensive, and the reason that this person in the Guardian, and I didn't write down the name, unfortunately, but it was a fairly old article, said, hey, let's stop using the term basket case, is because of the etymology. So from Etym Online, basket case, 1919 American English, originally a reference to rumors of quadriplegics as a result of catastrophic wounds suffered in World War I. The term is probably literal, i.e. stuck in a basket. But so like your movie, but basket had, but basket could also have colloquial connotations of poverty and helplessness long before this. The figurative sense of person emotionally unable to cope starts in 1921. Let me go on and read from phrases.org.uk.
Please.
They say that, again, it's an infirm or failing person or thing unable to function properly, originally referred to soldiers who had lost arms and legs and had to be carried by others. So that look on your face is telling it all. It is like some boxing Helena stuff, if you remember that one. I mean, essentially what happened is World War I, which was a meat grinder, as we know, and this term basket case started springing up that as people were saying, oh my gosh, it's so bad out there. There are soldiers having to be carried around in a basket because they've lost all of their limbs.
Right.
Now, here's what's interesting about this one. I mean, that's disturbing, but let's be honest. I mean, people lost limbs for sure.
Yeah.
But here's what's kind of wild about this one is that the term, definitely came up, but it wasn't based on a specific person or an example. It was
Mhm.
more this sort of rumor of people being carried around in baskets, and
Oh,
therefore
okay.
that person's a basket case, he's no good. But so much so that the Surgeon General came out to denounce the term basket case, or to say it doesn't happen. So from the Boston Evening Globe, March
Mhm.
27th, 1919. Let me just read this to you.
Please.
Major General Ireland, Surgeon General of the Army, said today that there was no foundation for widely circulated and persistent reports of basket cases in Army hospitals. And then he goes on to define it. A basket case is a soldier who has lost both legs and both arms and therefore cannot be carried on a stretcher. And he said, quote, I have personally examined the records, said General Ireland, and I'm going to say there is not a single basket case either on this side of the water nor among the soldiers of the American Expeditionary Forces. Further,
Mm.
I wish to emphasize that there has been no instance of an American soldier so wounded during the whole period of the war. The lady doth protest too much. I don't know. It's
Maybe.
a little weird that they would put this statement out,
What
but
did Dr. Jenny McCarthy have to say about that? Were her records back? Did she have a Facebook page back then?
you know what? She didn't, but we have a corollary that we're going to get to here. So okay, people are getting their arms and legs blown off.
Yeah.
General Ireland's like, there's no basket cases. I checked. I personally checked everywhere. Didn't happen. So in the denial, though, he defines, here's what a basket case is.
Mhm.
So then you don't have a ton of examples in the years after the war that the term starts kind of dying down. You don't have a lot of examples of it being used until what should happen, World War II. And again, in World War II, there is a statement that comes out. So in the Surgeon General, the new Surgeon General, in May of 1944, in the Yank, which was the Army Weekly, and let's just
Yeah.
pause a minute for that. The Yank, the Surgeon General, this time he's got an even better name, Major General Norman T. Kirk, not to be confused with James T. Kirk, but it's a cool name. He said, quote, there is nothing to rumors of so-called basket cases. This is World War II. Cases of men with both legs and arms amputated. Again, he defines it for everybody. So why was it so necessary for the U.S. Surgeon General to come out in each World War and state there are no basket cases? Let's go to worldwide words.
All right.
First of all, before I get into sort of the reason for that, Michael Quinion, our hero, whose name I'm
Yeah.
sure we're mispronouncing,
Mhm.
maybe one day we'll have the nerve to have him on and he'll tell us how it's really pronounced.
Right.
We probably got Quinion right, and he's probably Michelle or something.
Yeah.
But there's no way it's being pronounced right.
It's going to balance out somewhere.
Yeah. He made a good point too about basket case, that the term echoed a standard usage of the time, that a literal basket case was a hamper,
Mhm.
a woven container for dry goods, but that the new sense played on case in the medical sense of an instance of disease or injury, which is a good point that I hadn't connected. Like,
Yeah.
this guy's a mental case, a nut case, it's a
Mhm.
basket case. So it sort of
Okay.
has that word play with it. And of course, you leave it to Worldwide Words to be the one to like point that out, which is now in retrospect seems obvious.
Right.
But he also pointed out that one of the reasons that these denials about basket cases were needed was that in 1939, Dalton Trumbo wrote an anti-war novel called Johnny Get His Gun, about a First World War veteran, Joe
Mhm.
Bonham, who was blown up and lost not only all of his limbs, but also his face.
Mhm.
And he was denied the right to die. It was made into a film in 1971.
Johnny, get your gun.
That's it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So are you familiar with this work?
I am familiar with it because it was used extensively in Metallica's first video ever.
Yes.
One.
Yes.
It was a big deal when that came out, and it is a pretty shocking visual. I believe the movie was an anti-war also in response to Vietnam, but it at least benefited by making a pretty good Metallica video in the late 80s.
Well, yeah. And I hadn't connected the two, but I remember that footage, and I remember being sort of like, it was pretty disturbing when I saw it in what, 1989 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. That movie made a real impact in whenever the movie was made. The book was 1939. Oh, the film was 19. Oh, excuse me. The film wasn't until 1971, so that
Mhm.
visual wasn't out there. So scratch that. But still,
Yeah.
the book itself was clearly. I mean, the fact that he had to like kick it up a notch to losing a face and
Yeah.
listen, I can't claim to be a historian in any way, shape, or form. Certainly on Dalton Trumbo, and I don't try to peg people just by their party affiliations. But
Right.
he was a avowed communist. So
Yeah.
I'd say boo for
Yeah. Boo for communism.
boo for communism. And I know that what's his name? Breaking Bad guy, Walter White. Oh,
Oh yeah.
he did a movie. I haven't seen it because it looked kind of boring,
Yeah.
but supposedly was good. But anyway, so this guy Trumbo writes this book, and now people are reading it, and this anti-war sentiment is happening,
Mhm.
and there's this belief that every third guy is being carried around in a basket with no face and not
Right.
being given the chance to even die properly. So it's propaganda. So he's my corollary to Jenny McCarthy. He
Yeah.
probably has a little bit more. His writing is probably a little bit better. By the way, Jenny
Yeah.
McCarthy, I recently heard, wrote 6 books, which is pretty stunning. I saw that on something. So good for her, I guess. But
Yeah. And Dalton Trumbo was never a centerfold, so she's
yeah,
got that on him.
that's true. So she's what you would call at least a double threat.
Yeah.
So the book itself doesn't use the term basket case, but it does describe Joe Bonham being
Mhm.
transported in a wicker basket. So it plays on that fear. Rumors that there were examples of basket cases circulated among U.S. forces in the Second World War, particularly in a report in December of 1943 that stated, quote, "The real candidate for Time magazine's Man of the Year should be the 21-year-old basket case in the Army's Percy Jones Hospital at Battle Creek, Michigan," which brought the denial that I quoted earlier from
Mhm.
Norman T. Kirk. So Time magazine then came back in 1945 and said, okay, we did find a soldier that existed named Frederick Hensel, who what was a basket case according to them. So they went out of their way to find one, and that now
Right.
he's a chicken farmer, quadruple amputee of the war, chicken farmer. So whether or not it exists, that's where it came from. It had a very dark origin. Nowadays we don't use it quite that way. We don't see, we don't have those same fears of, in our wars, all of our boys are over there getting carried around in baskets. So now it
Right.
just means someone useless or unable to cope, as we mentioned before, specifically as a result of a mental illness, or as we talked about, a country that is unable to pay its debts or
Yeah.
feed its people. So to wrap up,
Yeah.
basket case started as a term to describe a soldier who had lost all of his limbs and had to be carried in a basket, was denied by the Surgeon General. Then anti-war commie Dalton Trumbo took it up a
Mhm.
notch, wrote a novel where not only does the soldier lose his limbs, but also his face. Denied again by Norman T. Kirk. And
Right.
then Green Day wrote a song called Basket Case. And here we are.
Yeah. Here we are. And don't leave Metallica out of this too. If we're going to talk about Green Day, we should at least talk
You're right.
about Metallica. So
You're right.
my initial reaction to this was that if this was a real thing, like to be offended. And I try not to, in an age where everyone's offended by everything and very vocal about it, I wouldn't want, if there were actually people that this pointed back to feel bad about using that term. But now that we've kind of gone the whole way with it, I'm fine with using it again. I've
I
come
am
back.
too.
I
And
rescind my facial expression
yeah,
from
it's
earlier.
and I will say, when I said people were offended, people weren't even offended. I couldn't find any articles where people said they were offended, except for that one guy that just said, "Let's stop using it. It's lowbrow." But there are. I didn't want to give it away, so I can't remember which dictionary it was, but a
Mhm.
couple of the dictionaries, the very first entry says, number 1, offensive,
Mhm.
slang for quadruple
Yeah.
amputee.
But I think
So,
every dictionary now has that for every word. Like the first entry is offensive for whatever it is. I think that's
exactly.
standard now for that. So semi-related to someone being a basket case,
Mhm.
I saw something the other day. that really kind of blew my mind. So you've seen before like signs that will be on the back of somebody's car that have new driver, attention,
Yes.
new driver on the road,
Hmm.
which to me is always just sounds like a bad idea, because even when I see it, and I'm a relatively, I think, peaceful person. When I see that,
Hmm.
it makes me want to antagonize the person in the car. But you generally see it like on the back, so when you're behind them, if they're making bad decisions or
Right.
or whatever, you're just prepared for it.
Hmm.
So I was walking the other day and I had to do a double take. I saw one of these signs, but I saw it on the driver's side back door.
Interesting. Okay.
And the thought occurred to me
Hmm.
of, in what circumstance is someone going to see this?
Right.
And if they do, does it really matter?
It's too late at that point.
Like
Or
if
yeah.
you're in T-bone position,
Hmm.
you're not going to go, they're,
That's right.
maybe I need to ease off and not plow into the side of their car.
It doesn't seem like the best place to put it. I
No,
agree.
no. No, I didn't get a chance to see if the person had, maybe they had like triangulated and it covered every potential area to alert people. But
Mhm.
it seemed kind of odd to me that the T-bone position was where they decided to mount that. But what do I know? Maybe it's somebody that had gone through a difficult circumstance and was like, if only there'd been a sign
Mm,
on the side
right,
of the car, on the driver's side back seat, to make sure that no one crashed into the car
right.
and T-boned it.
Yeah, well, in the same way that when you see a baby on board sign in the back, you're thinking to yourself, I was gonna just ram into this car from behind because
Yeah.
who cares? Just adults in there. And then you see the baby on board sign. It's like, whoa, easy. We're not going to slam into this car. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. If I'm running through a stale red light and I happen to see student driver, I may decide to apply the brakes a little sooner than I would have otherwise. So I can see the utility, I guess.
Yeah. And also shout out to any driving teachers that are out there. I don't think they get enough credit for talk about ending. I mean, they could be a basket case in several senses that we've discussed
Yes.
here. I mean, you
Yeah.
could end up getting carted around.
Gosh, imagine it's going to be so weird for kids, especially that are, they've been going to school. They can't see each other's faces. They're living in this world where this crazy world, and then they're going to be learning to drive. And you've got yahoos putting signs on the side of the car. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I think everybody has come out of this quarantine changed for one way or the other. So whether it's you're a little stir crazy, you're a basket case now,
Mhm.
or you're just a driving instructor.
Yeah.
Let's all try to get it together. And with that, Steve, you want to take us home?
Yeah. Take you home. So thank everybody. Well, I'm going to take you home, Scott, but that's later. That has nothing
Yes,
to do with
sir.
this right now. So thank you, everyone, for listening to Origin of Species. If you enjoyed the show, please help us spread the word by leaving a positive review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. For more great content and to directly support our show, become a Speaksies supporter at patreon.com/Speaksies. That's patreon.com/Speaksies. Any amount of support you provide allows you access to great bonus content, including other Speaksies shows like Personal Records, True Facts with Robert Banquette, and our exclusive video podcast, Speaksies Uncut, where Scott and I take a break from the words and phrases and talk about other subjects that we're interested in, like the historical figures with whom we would like to engage in sexual congress and what we really think about the world of hot air ballooning. For all this and more, go to patreon.com/Speaksies. That's patreon.com/Speaksies.
All right, Bob's your uncle.
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the devil.
Speaksies.